Thank you for joining us once again on the NBA Fantasy Baller Podcast DFS edition for this Wednesday, the 8th of March, 2017. Last night was a really fun slate. We kind of thought it was either going to be extremely low scoring or extremely high scoring. But nonetheless, it was extremely exciting. In terms of our plays here, Julius Randle had a triple-double. He just always seems to be in a good spot against the Mavericks. I remember that was like his first big game in the league was against the Mavericks in the 2015-2016 season in November, I believe. And I've kind of just played him against them ever since. You had John Wall, who put up over 5x, but didn't quite hit that multiplier that Russell Westbrook did, but still, nonetheless, he was an excellent play, and you kind of needed to have him and Russ together on FanDuel to make any good money. Seth Curry, decent job between 26 and 32 fantasy points, depending on the site. Didn't hit 5x value, but came closer to it than Bradley Beal, and he was in the tournament-winning lineups. How do I know? Because I did on DraftKings last night. For those who don't know, I put together a projection system, and I have made the results available to everyone in our email list. And it's important to note that those change all day due to a variety of things, mostly me. But they've just been doing very well. And so I've been testing them in the quarter arcades each night, and I've turned my money over 10 times over in the week since we've put them out there. There's a lot that goes into it. I would just say that projections are not meant to be used straight up. There's a lot of noise in projections a lot of times. So you kind of have to go through the list if you're using an optimization site to determine what information is good. Like, for example, our tool consistently spits out Joe Johnson as being an excellent point per dollar play because he's fallen, I think, to like minimum price on DraftKings, and because he started the season with Hayward injured a little bit and he was getting some run, the way we calculate our projections still accounts for that because you can't ignore it, and so it makes it a little heavier. Also important to note, how I've been able to have successes. I've basically locked 3 players in every night. Last night it was Julius Randle because I said on the podcast this is a guy that I was really excited about. Locked him in. Locked in Tyler Ulis on DraftKings because I just thought his price was still way under what it should be, and that didn't exactly work out. 18.5 points wasn't what I was looking for. I was expecting to hit around the 30-point mark. On our mailing list, I always include a sample lineup. Let me pull it up real quick so that I can tell everyone exactly what I said. But for most mediums that we do, I try to offer a variety of picks because 6 guys aren't the only guys that are going to end up going off each night in fantasy. Then you figure some of those picks are also featured in our article, which I'll start to link to this as well. And so long story short, I end up including an extra pick or an extra element of things that I really like on the on my other email. And I mentioned that the third person I was locking in was Jan Mahimi. I said in our newsletter that he's a risky play, and there was really no value last night. And I thought he was a guy who could hit 6x at minimum price based off of his previous performance. Well, needless to say, he ended up hitting like 15x value. Marcin Gortat is probably going to be a thing of the past in Washington. Mahimi is just much more what they need in the game, and could have even been better because he was a rebound short of a triple double-double. So all I'm saying is, if you like what I have to say, great, subscribe to the podcast, but don't think that this is it. You can check out other activity that we have through our mailing list and our picks that we post each day on researchfantasy.com. All right, that's enough shilling for right now. Let's get on to today's slate, and I think this is going to be an interesting slate. I don't love this slate, but I don't hate it either, and I think that there's some sneaky values, and I'm going to kind of focus on things from a DraftKings perspective tonight because that's where I've been having most of my luck, and as much as I'm doing these videos for you, there's a little bit of selfishness in it. I like to kind of air my thoughts and really define why I'm making the decisions I'm making. So let's start things off today with Jrue Holiday of the New Orleans Pelicans, 12-7 on FantasyDraft, 7,600 FanDuel, 6,800 on DraftKings. So I love the idea of getting Jrue at under 7K on DraftKings because you're always looking at the potential for a double-double. So if he hits that, that's 2 extra points right away. He's probably going to hit some three-pointers, so you get a couple of points there. The matchup here at home against the Raptors is really intriguing because I think that he has the ability to dice right through Corey Joseph, as so many of the point guards have been since he took over. It's just too low of a price. I know that there's additional mouths to feed now in New Orleans with Jordan Crawford coming over. Crawford is not likely to see a ton of time. He's a volume shooter, and if his shot's not falling, you're pretty much going to be stuck with just about nothing. And we'll get to him a little later because I'm not writing him off completely. The matchup is pretty good. I think Holiday should be able to come through with at least 35 fantasy points, but we're talking about an upward of 40 outing, what I'm looking for. Outside of the Jazz game, he would put up 50 against the Lakers, 43 against the Spurs, 35 against the Pistons. His track record is pretty solid there, and I think that he is a good play in tournaments, and that's what I'm really focusing on. I'm thinking that there's enough plays, there's enough high-dollar guys, and especially with a guy like Isaiah Thomas, who I think is underpriced and could end up having a big night, I think Holiday could be pretty low-owned. Let's move on from there to Hassan Whiteside, center for the for the Miami Heat. He is 14-3 on FantasyDraft, 8,500 FanDuel, 7,700 on DraftKings, and for me it just comes down to, number one, the price, 7,700, I don't view as being high enough. Number two, you're still looking at a situation where James Johnson might miss some time, and that doesn't affect his minutes, but it certainly could affect Whiteside's usage. Number three, I'm just not convinced Cody Zeller is able to deal with Drummond in the paint with Whiteside. Lord have mercy, I'm all over the place this morning. I don't think Cody Zeller can deal with Whiteside in the paint, and I think 7,700 is a low price that you could be looking at for someone that has a pretty nice double-double upside. Now, granted, again, looking at his box scores, 34, 39, 40, 43, 47, 47, 22, 53. I just don't think that there's a reason why his price should be this low. I'm fully expecting him to break the 45-ish mark, and I think there's upside even into the 60s. I know that's really a long shot, but I'm putting a lot of eggs in the Hassan Whiteside basket tonight. I think my favorite play tonight, and I'm sure a lot of people's favorite plays tonight, will be Jimmy Butler of the Chicago Bulls, 17,000 FantasyDraft, 9,200 on both FanDuel and DraftKings. He gets an Orlando team that's awful at scoring the basketball. They're not that great at defense. They play at a slower pace, and so do the Bulls, which is not something we typically want. I think most of the time you want to target players that are moving a little bit quicker and are going to see more possessions, and I get that. But I think what you have here with Butler is the likelihood that Wade is going to be out again. The offensive load is going to be on his shoulders. I don't know that I love him if Wade plays because the usage does come down quite a bit. And the team just seems disjointed right now with Wade. Not to say they weren't disjointed without him, losing to a Detroit team that I have absolutely no respect for. But I think you could do a lot worse tonight than Jimmy Butler. I'm not going to throw he's our top play of the day, but he's kind of the top play of the day because I think he's a great point per dollar value. All right, let's move on from there. Let's head to our value plays. And this one's actually a little bit risky right now because of what's going on for this team. And that's Rodney Hood, 9,200 fantasy draft, 4,300 FanDuel, 4,700 DraftKings. This is the shooting guard from the Utah Jazz. They will be playing a fast-paced matchup against the Houston Rockets. Yeah, so my rule is typically I like spending down for players on DraftKings, and this is actually one where you have to pay about $400 more. But with the three-point ability that he's going to give you, that money can be made up with pretty quickly. Now, I'm not saying that he's likely to hit 8 triples to make up the 4-point difference, but with turnovers being less, all things considered, I think he should be able to still hit value. I've got him penciled in around 28 fantasy points tonight if this game doesn't turn into a blowout, and here's why it could turn into a blowout. Shelvin Mack, who wasn't playing anyway, has already been ruled out. Derek Favors has already been ruled out. Joe Johnson is questionable to doubtful, and George Hill is questionable at this point. So that means the Jazz will have to run a starting lineup that looks like Dante Exum, Rodney Hood, Gordon Hayward, Boris Diaw, and Rudy Gobert. Not the worst combination you could put out there until those players have to come off the floor and suddenly the bench looks like Raul Neto, Trey Lyles, who is underappreciated and could be a sneaky value option tonight. I'm just not sure how this game really comes together for this team, but I think Hood should still be in a good position to get at least 22 to 23 fantasy points tonight. Moving on from there, let's talk Jordan Crawford, shooting guard for the New Orleans Pelicans, 6,900 fantasy draft, 3,900 FanDuel, 3,500 DraftKings. Outside of this year, we can look back, and he's been, I don't want to say fantasy darling, but I know that I can remember situations where Crawford got some extra run and put together some monster fantasy outings. So the potential is absolutely there, but he does not come without a gigantic asterisk next to his name. He's played one game in the association since he came back, and he hit over 30 fantasy points, which put him pretty close at that point to the 10x marker. I'm not saying he can do the same thing tonight, but he's going to be doing his damage coming off the bench. I think that there's certainly the opportunity that he can come through with a 20-point game again, and I don't think I don't think him being there is going to affect Jrue Holiday too much. I think Jrue Holiday was just affected by the matchup with the Utah Jazz, so I'm not hesitant to roll him out tonight. Last up, let's go to Charlotte with Marvin Williams, who disappointed all of us on Monday night. 10-6 fantasy draft, 5-1 FanDuel, 5,400 DraftKings for a guy who's getting 38 to 40 minutes. This is just insane, and I get it. Like, he sometimes just doesn't do enough, and we saw that. He went into halftime with like 2 points and 2 rebounds. He finished admirably with like 16 or 17 fantasy points, probably 18 on DraftKings. I know that I'm probably citing his FanDuel points. Let's check real quick. 16.3, so definitely 16.25. Not the greatest, but if you look at his log before that, 39.5, 29, 33.25, 17.5, 29, 29, 25. I mean, there's definitely some upside to playing him. I will probably have a pretty healthy amount of him. Miami doesn't really have, without James Johnson on the floor, I mean, you're running Luke Babbitt at the 4. Luke Babbitt? I mean, come on. No offense to Luke Babbitt, but it's just not going to get the job done against a veteran like Marvin Williams, so I wouldn't hesitate rolling him out tonight. All right, that wraps it up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel below. Each day we'll bring you our favorite DFS picks, and we will be doing that for the baseball season. I've started to put together a list of videos I'm going to make. Not too much in terms of basketball. You want to hit the sports and the advice in terms of construction and stuff like that, building into the season as opposed to on the way out of the season. So I'll have some statistics, probably around early October next year, I'll put that stuff together. Head over to researchfantasy.com, join our NBA mailing list, and you'll get great advice like to play Jan Mahimi. Make sure to head over to Facebook, like us, follow us on Twitter at researchandwin, and we'll see you tomorrow with more DFS picks.